pleased to welcome Kerwin Rae to the show, all the way from Australia in Byron Bay. Welcome, my friend. It's good to have you.
Thank you, Eric. Great to be here, man.
So, for those of you that may not know, Kerwin has a vision to continue to push civilization forward, especially by helping people really tap into that deep space of purpose. And I really acknowledge your journey of having, really failed through a lot of different things at school, but really going through addiction, encountering different experiences, nearly close to death, suffering a stroke, but really focusing on the good consistently, brother. This appeal in the way that your unique approach to the way that you show up in the world and the way that you this no bullshit attitude. I really love this truth, this discovery of wanting to serve more, give more, be more, and do more. And I love that approach to life, to the depth. And so I just want to say thank you for taking the time because I know time is our most valuable asset.
Mate, my pleasure, Eric. Good to be here, mate.
So, brother, if there's anything that I missed or things that you're working on right now specifically, I'd love for you to just share any kind of specific projects that maybe you're really excited about that maybe you want to share just off the hop kind of to the audience that may be paying attention.
Mate, the biggest project I'm working on right now is the project of being a dad. It's almost a full-time job, and it's one that I ideally love. And yeah, the other project would be me. Yeah, right now I'm going through a bit of an internal inner renovation, and so yeah, traversing some big questions and moving through some big pieces in life, and yeah, really looking forward to coming out the other side and seeing what the gifts have to offer.
What a blessing,
It
man.
sounds a little bit self-centered or self-centered, but I'm just moving through
Not
some
at all.
stuff. That's probably
Not at all. In fact, I think that that's probably the greatest gift of our life is to discover oneself. Is
oh
like to trust thyself is one of the greatest gifts that we can discern is to move forward with that level of intention. So I really acknowledge that because when we discover that responsibility of the relationship with ourselves, we find that bigger, more meaningful, responsible, activated approach with something greater than ourselves, and as a result, can really pay attention to the reverence between one another. And that's what I'm really excited of learning about you, brother, because I think that there's a lot more meaning in life than most of us have been taught to believe.
yeah, I'd echo that. I'd agree with that wholeheartedly.
So, bro, we touched on a couple small details, although very minor, but you speak to being unstoppable, and this is something that I really naturally progress to is this unstoppability within ourselves of feeling a lot of times that maybe society has cultivated this unseen perspective of wanting to keep us small. I believe in Australia it's called like tall poppy syndrome or something like this.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, this experience of yours that has contributed to so much of your why, your purpose to keep serving, keep giving, keep doing. What was it? What was it? What was this experience, this kind of breakthrough moment that gave you that I gotta keep going. I gotta keep knowing that I'm in service to something way more profound.
Look, I think Unstoppable in its initial incarnation isn't necessarily the most healthy version.
Hmm.
I think some of us really, master the art of, psychological resilience, not to the point where we become hardy, but sometimes to the point where we actually become hardened. I know for
Hmm.
myself, throughout my earlier life, I really struggled to allow myself to rely and trust others. And so as a result, I would find myself taking on everything and just, trying to do everything I possibly could myself in order to push through. And there were many benefits of that, developing, a very strong set of psychological tools and gifts, and a very resilient mind. Um, but I think it's the one thing I don't want to do with the notion of Unstoppable, at least with its first iteration, is really feed into the culture of more and just
Mm.
constantly pursuing more just for the sake of more. And nor do I want to contribute to the culture of, pushing beyond, because oftentimes we talk about how do we push beyond our limits. And, I think there are certain times in our life where we do need to learn how to push. But there are certain times or certain seasons in our life where we need to learn how to yield. And we need to learn how to, slow down. We need to learn how to listen. We need to learn how to surrender. And so for me, I guess you could say the iteration of unstoppable that I'm moving into now is more of an essence. So it's less about the physicality and less about the psychology and more about the essence of, um, maybe soul's too big a word, but the essence of ourselves, and trying to discover what that is, in the pursuit, of that, because I think oftentimes we get, quite distracted by the world and the things around us. Money is a big distraction, social media, politics, pandemics. We have all these raging distractions around us. So it'd be very easy for us to lose sight of discovering the most important gifts that we have, which is the gift of ourselves and our essence. And I think, we're never, and this is what I believe is probably one of the most truly beautiful things about self-discovery, is there is no limit. Because there's no one else. Every single person on this planet is, in some way, shape or form, a direct ancestor of sorts or a direct replica. And so when you consider the profound, genius that we exist within, there's not much that we can't. And I think it's fair to say that, I'm never going to become a Formula One driver, and nor am I ever going to become, a world number one in tennis. But we can learn so many different things about ourselves in the pursuit of going outside of who we think we are, and becoming rigid around that concept based on, our life experiences and the things that we do.
Brother, you touch on the word too big. And I just want to emphasize that I think that it's actually the most beautiful thing to discover the essence of that soul. And it's beautiful that you are willing to go to that no limit, to that infinite space of awareness. Because we are and I'll tell you the story. I always used to be told, like, "Hey, Eric, your energy is too big. You have too much energy. You have too much this. You have too much too." And I was like, "No, you know what? Like, just because you don't see that, my light or my happiness or my joy or even my anger, it doesn't mean that I'm too big. It means that you think that I'm too big or that we're not. But I believe that, like you said, we have no limits. So I was like, I would always take this curiosity and say, okay, if you think I'm too big, what's wrong with me? That was my first question,
Yeah, I
you
get it.
know? And I always found that, like, having this energy, this discovery of ourselves, it was the greatest gift. And so by stepping into that no limit or unstoppable version, that in this iteration of this essence,
Look,
is
I
it
think
possible?
is it possible to know? Is that what you're asking?
No, I was going to say, is it possible to integrate that as a collective
Oh,
into the
fuck.
soul intelligence of what we're doing here on Earth as
Is
a
it
collective?
as a collective, mate? Who knows? Collective is a big word. It's a big thing. And when, as I said, we live in a world that is, celebrated in most cases for all the wrong things. As individuals, it's very difficult to, ask yourself the question: in our lifetime, are we going to see an integration of that type of essence at a collective level? Mate, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I would love to think that it's possible. I would love to think that this is a multi-generational, multi-generational, maybe even multi-planetary project. If we don't wipe ourselves up out in the process, where we move towards perhaps a society and an environment that is, getting back to the essence of what we're here to do, which is to have experiences, in all shapes and sizes. I don't think there's necessarily a right or a wrong, but I do think there are a number of opposing perspectives that would suggest otherwise.
What are your thoughts on the transition from taking the philosophy of awareness to the biology of it, to really embodying that space of principles and taking that curiosity of energy, vibration, and frequency and integrating it like nature has for billions of years?
Look, nature does it so effortlessly, and I think that's the challenge for us is we have to try so hard to do everything because we have this component of self will. um, I think spirituality is one of those things that a lot of people will, or self awareness is one of those things that people will seek out and try and find in a book, in a podcast, in a conversation. And I think self awareness, when you go back to its roots, is really just it's an ongoing practice, but it's not a practice that is partaken in the absence of life. Like, I'm one of these people that, believes in the philosophy, much like Alan Watts. If you want to become self-aware, you don't go and sit in a cave and spend 40 years meditating, because you're missing out on life. You're missing out on those experiences. It's like, can you witness yourself in the experiences of, joy, pleasure? Can you witness yourself in the experience of pain and suffering? And for some people, they don't even know how to witness themselves. They're so involved in every moment, either in the future of that moment, the past of that moment, or the distraction of the moment. They're not actually aware that there is some kind of an entity inside them witnessing this moment right now. And I think when you look at a developing self-awareness, perhaps self-awareness is getting to the point where we can start observing that we're observing something, witnessing the witness. And that's not necessarily a place you can live, but it's certainly a place where you become really curious about the response of the person that you're witnessing, and that to me is developing a level of a relationship in the moment where we are able to embody, and that would be at a behavior level, the versions of ourselves that are most authentic, but allow us to, have the experience that's required, because again, it's not to say that anger is a bad thing, but there's a saying that Alan Watts talks about. He says that there are no wrong feelings. There are no wrong feelings, and when we, can learn how to practice, in self-awareness and witness our feelings versus getting lost in the expression or the demonstration of our feelings, it's a very different practice. Because you might believe that self-awareness is, having the ability to feel anger and then express that anger. I'm moving towards a philosophy where I think is very healthy to be able to feel anger and direct anger when necessary, but not when it comes at a consequence that requires, more repair in all scenarios. And I think one of the pursuits that I'm finding really curious right now is moving towards the experience of witnessing emotions and feeling emotions versus expressing emotions and then witnessing the aftermath of that.
Total presence.
Well, I don't know if that's available, total presence, but I certainly know glimpses of it are.
So when you're capturing or acknowledging that energy, do you find that to be more available to you when when you are in nature, or when you're spending time, with your family or the people that you love, your community, the people that you're serving? Where does that moment of observation come through for you, where you are noticing the magic kind of share, and you be the vessel that needs to express in that moment, in a
I think
specific scenario?
it can come through in any moment, and even in these moments that you and I are having right now, like there's the opportunity just to, bear witness to the conversation that we're having and the words that are being spoken and, the silences that are available to us. So are there any particular situations? As I said, for me, it's one of those moments. It's one of those things where it's in and it's out. I have these moments sometimes where I'm speaking on stage and I'm completely in the moment and I'm completely there. But then sometimes I find myself witnessing myself speaking, or I'll be in a conversation like you right now. Well, I had a podcast earlier. It was a really great conversation. And throughout the conversation, we're engaging. And then every now and then I just observe myself in the conversation. And so, you know, for me, it can happen anywhere, anytime. It just really comes down to, taking that perspective of, am I aware of what's going on right now and who's watching? And not turning that into a thought process, because when we start breaking things down and trying to label things, because it's one thing to witness the moment, but it's nothing to witness the moment and then start trying to label the moment and label the experience and label and create judgments and dissect the situation. That's, to me, is not self-awareness. That's more ego. That would be that would almost be like an egoic level of awareness, because we do have egoic awareness, and the ego is aware of so many things, and it can break them down, it can cut them down, it can label those things. And then you've got a purity of awareness where you're not trying to label things. You're just in a state of observation, because when you look at reality in its full context, or nature, you referred to nature earlier. It's like, imagine when you go out and you look at a mountain, you are taking in so much information at once. But then you're on the phone to your friend and you try and describe to them what you're trying to see. Words could do no justice to the gifts and the vision that nature can lay before you. But when we do that, we literally break it down into really basic sounds that are trying to explain something that is so infinitely beautiful. And I think oftentimes in life, that's what we do. We try and break things down to understand them, rather than just observing them for their, the infinite beauty that is actually inside. And by inside, I mean observable. It's like, what's there?
What I I love it. I'm hearing like really appreciating, right? Appreciating versus creating any expectations.
Well, you don't even necessarily, I believe, have to appreciate. You can just observe something, and yeah, you can feel a sense of appreciation. But even when you appreciate something, in a sense, that is a form of judgment, because you're labeling it. Because you could look at a scene and go, "Oh my God, that's just beautiful," but then you look down closer, and then you see a bobcat eating a little fucking deer, baby deer. You'll be like, "Oh my God, that's terrible." And so then all of a sudden, your scene of appreciation turns into one of horror, versus just looking at nature in all of its glory and not feeling the need to label, and just observe it. I think as humans, we are biased towards feeling good emotions, appreciation, gratitude. They're all good. They're all healthy emotions. Love them, joy, happiness. And we're biased against feeling, bad emotions, fear, shame, sadness, anger, grief. Whereas, when we can observe all emotions without any judgment or bias, then that gives us the ability to be able to, hold a better space for ourselves in all situations. Imagine living a life where you didn't judge yourself. Imagine the potential that could unfold if you could live in a world where you didn't feel the need to judge yourself or others. And if there is no judgment, and judgment is nothing more than a limit. If there's no judgment, there's no limit. If there are no limitations, then you're playing a limitless game.
And you get to make the decision consciously when you want to express.
Yeah, and you get to choose how. Because it's one thing to be angry, but it's another thing to be angry and then go and punch someone in the face.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be, because if you look at the biology of anger, or any emotion for that matter, it's just a bunch of peptides that are flowing through your body that are connecting with different nerve cells that are creating a sensation. And that sensation is either regulated or unregulated. And the more unregulated that emotion becomes, which means the less equipped you are to process an emotion, the more chances you have of that nervous system, acting out and reacting in a way to try and regulate that emotion. For some people, the only way they know how to regulate anger is through violence. And for others, the way that people will regulate anger is just by observing the sensation and actually feeling and acknowledging with themselves, I'm angry. Whew. Oh, wow. Okay, let's just breathe through that for a second. Whew. And much like the person who gets angry, lashes out, punches someone, and then, 10 minutes later, they feel fine. The person who gets angry and sits there and sensates, for 5 to 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes later, they're fine as well. They just didn't create a scenario where now they have other emotions that are going to be created, and other conversations and other things that are going to be created as a result of that expression.
There's a huge responsibility in that shift.
I think there's a huge responsibility, in self-awareness.
Right.
You know, self-awareness in itself requires a responsibility of self. And that's where I think self-awareness in some respects is very pop culture, because people like
Mm.
the idea of self-awareness, but they don't like necessarily the responsibility that comes with it.
Right. Well, this is beautiful. This process that you expressed, this difference and this unique nuance of, okay, how do I choose to observe it versus actually going out and punching somebody? This also comes from that scarcity mentality, right? There not being less loss or never, not having enough, right? Versus I guess what could be perceived as toxic masculine approach versus the abundant and peaceful approach. So how would you recognize in terms of, like, we've come from thousands, like I myself personally have in the past experienced a lot of my own emotions and reacted. And now the difference in being able to observe that and not feel bad about it, but just observe it and choose how to be peaceful in my approach. That experience is also something that is on a collective scale been very scarce in the way that we've moved as a civilization versus an abundant approach to how we can choose to, as men and women and humanity, decide to collectively create more economic prosperity alongside one another in producing that level of energy. So observing that and paying attention to those nuances, the way we can do it at micro, macro, it allows us to really bring that balance together or that harmony to cultivate that in the now, in the present moment. So having that experience as men, again, from myself observing, the experience of life or watching when I was a little boy how a tough man needs to be versus the experience of actually holding a space, and it's okay. It's okay to cry or be this way or share these emotions, even if you're angry. And what's that shift? What's that energy transition kind of need to look like, or can it look like, so that we can encourage a space for our future generations, our children, our family, our community to actually be in that place of safety? Because I believe that we can do that as brothers and sisters and cultivate that level of regenerative culture so that even down the line, when we're no longer in the physical space, in this body, in this vehicle, that our children get to actually carry on and stand on shoulders that are even more empowering.
Is there a question in that, buddy?
All I'm saying is, all I'm suggesting is, how did
Yep.
you be able to navigate the uh the transition from really stepping in? Because what I'm seeing is that we are constantly, as a society, in the past, thinking of a scarce mentality, and it's existing in this current reality. So how can we, as men that are in service, cultivate a more abundant lifestyle or culture for our next generations?
I think there's a lot. You've said a lot, so it's hard to really, segment and speak specifically to any one thing. But I'll talk to a couple of things that you've shared. And I think the first thing is this idea of toxic masculinity. I think I'm more in the camp, and don't get me wrong, I've seen my fair share of toxic masculinity expressed, especially in business, social media, anywhere. But I think the bigger question is less separation, more understanding. I don't think it's a toxic masculinity thing. I think it's maybe a toxic humanity thing. And I'm not saying humanity at large is toxic, but what I am saying is, you know, at this stage of the game, I'm surprised we haven't seen a He Too movement, because just as much as I have observed toxic masculine behavior, I've also observed toxic feminine behavior as well. And I think the challenge is, there's a lot of attention that keeps getting brought to these polar opposites, which is creating the polarization, which is only really perpetuating the divide that we're seeing in all forms of communication, online and offline. And when you talk to abundance, like for me, the abundance is really getting back to this space and this place where we aren't chasing more as a collective, as a community, or as individuals. And that's going to be really counter to, some of the things that I teach and have spoken about in the past, and even business, because business is, aren't I here to win? I guess in many ways it's really defining what winning looks like and at what cost. And I think if we really look at and take a step back and witness the behavior of more being the driver, you can really see a greater perspective on why the world has found itself in the situation that it is at a political and at a global level when it comes to, organizations and corporations, is because you have these entities that are just constantly after more. And when you're constantly driving for more, it is based on this feeling, this sensation, this belief that there's not enough, and then at some point it's going to run out. And the economics just don't work on that, because at some point something's going to run out. But when you when you look at it based on our current model of economics, but when you get back to more of a self-sustainable perspective, once upon a time, there were no major corporations, peddling wares at different holiday times all throughout the year. We were very self-sufficient, and our joy wasn't found on, phones or watches or shoes. Our joy was found in family and community. And, one of the things that I think as a collective we should be moving more towards is the abundance of community, and getting back to community and focusing on the abundance that community creates. Because when you can find, or when you can create community, there always just seems to be a way of things working out. There's always someone to help. There's always someone to support. There's always a mouth to be fed. There's always food to be shared. But it's when we play this game of isolation and divide, that really puts us into a space where we feel like we don't have enough. There is a lot of lack. So, yeah, look, I think, as I said, you said a lot, but the two pieces that I'll speak to the most is, firstly, I think as a collective, we need to do better. And the only way we can do better as a collective is by being at an individual level, more self-aware, having a greater level of responsibility, and focusing more on the community. Because I think when we start focusing more on communities, we self-organize, self-correct, and self-manage a lot better. Because I think most of the toxic behavior that we see often is bred in isolation. But when you're around or put into environments where there are healthy mammals and healthy humans, the collective has this way of, if the collective, or if that environment has a way of ironing out the creases. And the example that I use is Cesar Millan. I don't know if you're familiar with Cesar Millan. I'm a huge dog fan. I love dogs. I have a dog. I've trained my dog. I've trained a few dogs. But Cesar Millan is an incredible dog trainer, and he says he's very much about energetic leadership. And when he works with a dog, he says, I rehabilitate the dog and I train the human. But if he gets a really troubled dog, what he'll do is he'll take it out to his his farm or his ranch or whatever you call it, and he'll put it around other dogs. And what happens is the unhealthy dog becomes healthy, not just through, Caesar working with it, but in most cases by being put in a healthy environment. The environment becomes the self-correcting factor. The dog's like, ruff, ruff. No, that behavior is wrong. Ruff, ruff. That behavior is right. We love that behavior. Ruff. That behavior is toxic. And so as basic as that sounds, we need to start developing healthy communities that can be open and accepting of others, that we can bring them in and, create these self-correcting environments. Because right now what's happening is we have these toxic communities, these toxic environments, and you have healthy people emerging from the world and going into these environments, and they're being corrected into toxic behaviors. They're being trained into toxic behaviors. So, look, I don't think either of us can sit here right now and try and solve the problem. I think that would be potentially obnoxious. But I think drawing awareness to how us as individuals can, take a level of responsibility for ourselves and our own self-awareness and the development of our own communities and how we develop our communities, and doing that in a self-aware way with a self-aware practice. And again, I'm not talking about, peace, love, and mung beans. I'm talking just about people learning about people so that people can relate better to people in healthier ways. And we do that by becoming self-supportive and not trying to compete for every resource that is around us.
Thank you. You answered exactly what I was looking to cultivate. So thank you so much for listening. And I know I sometimes can do that because I get super inspired and curious.
The way my brain works, I work really good with short questions. But after
Oh,
too much conversation, I sometimes lose the track. That's just how my brain works. But you do what feels best for you, my friend.
no, but you captured it, so I'm grateful. So, this community, of bringing kind of like the mycelium network of community together, of energy production, of cultivating this type of energy within people, within each other. How do you see us moving forward in community and in nations, in Australia, Canada, across the planet, uh, to cultivate and look after one another even more, especially with inflation and the economic principles being
Yeah.
manipulated traditionally?
Look, I don't know, mate.
Recently.
I don't have those answers. If I did, I'd probably be doing some bigger things. But I think it all comes back to the individuals. I think businesses have a huge opportunity because as businesses, we do potentially carry a lot of influence. And I don't know what it's like in Canada, but I think it would be something similar. We've got 64% of our GDP is small business. And right now there is, what would appear to be a very concerted effort to reduce the number of small businesses and, really roll those up into greater levels of multinational globalized monopolies so that there is less dependence on small business. Because small business right now don't realize how powerful that they are. And that's really evident, especially with the way that people vote. And I think, small businesses in themselves, when they do their business well, they create their own communities. They create their own client bases. They create their own fans. And I think businesses that do that well, they have a great responsibility, but a great opportunity to, encourage the development of these types of behaviors and initiatives, not just at a customer level, but also at a team level. Whenever I'm working with a business, oftentimes, I'll say I'll be training the business owner, but I'll be rehabilitating the team because oftentimes the teams can be traumatized by the way that they've been led or driven or managed or run. And so, as owners, if we can develop strong communities within our business, and we can develop strong communities in our clients, the business is going to win. It's going to win. If you can do those things, the business will win. But it's knowing, when enough is enough. But then also with the extra, what do you do? Well, that's where the community comes in, and the things that we can do to support others and the community and the people around us, so that it becomes this self-sustaining model of growth. Like imagine a community. Imagine if we had all around the world, we had all these communities where they didn't need to buy, they didn't need to import, they didn't need to shop online. Everybody just was able to, within their own group, give everything that is needed. So food, clothing, shelter, and all the things. But then people say, well, but I want my shoes in red. There's so much of this, again, this separation, this labeling, this breaking down, and the judgment of what I want, what is good, what is bad. It just makes answering those questions just too hard. I think, we've just got to focus on ourselves, and I don't mean that in a selfish way. I mean that in a behavioural way. And what is the impact that I can have on myself? What is the impact I can have on those people around me? And then really look at that as a pebble in a pond, because that's all we are, mate. It's just a pebble, and we're getting thrown in the pond, 1,000 times a day, and those ripples are going out there and they're hitting things.
In terms of economics, since COVID, what have been some of the fundamental shifts that you've seen in the principles of economics? You mentioned, you're working lots with the small business owners. There's a lot of strength in resolve in business owners coming together as a community. What are you seeing in terms of the shift in inflation in Australia, or has that been a
Look, I think it's
huge?
like anywhere else. It's massive, and we're seeing interest rates rising. But when you look at the economics of it, like there's only, I think, like 2 or 3 major insurance companies in the world. I think we've got 2 or 3 players over here. They've got 2 or 3 major banks. We've got maybe two food mafias in this country. So inflation is very well managed. Inflation isn't happening to us; it's being done, and it's being done at a level to without getting into agendas and conspiracy, fringe theories. It seems to be being done in a way where it is limiting the options for small business to survive, and so a lot of small businesses are being rolled up, and then so then supply is being put back onto some of these bigger global monopolies. In Australia, the food is a great, because right now, I think the three major factors in inflation in Australia is food, and we've got two major operators in food. We've got energy, and again, we've only got a handful of major operators. You've got insurance, and fuel, and all of those industries are essentially owned by, controlled by monopolies, which in some cases are receiving huge government subsidies. But again, this is out of my wheelhouse. Well, I haven't said it, but this is really out of my wheelhouse. I'm not really an economics guy, but I've got my perspective, and right now I'm seeing a lot of business owners that are doing it very tough, and yeah, it's the inflation, the interest rates, it's really hurting a lot of people. So I think every business owner needs to be looking at, if they're serious about staying in business and not being rolled up, they need to really look at what they need to be doing in order to survive. What do they really need to focus on in order to thrive? Because there is a huge opportunity right now.
Do you mind if I ask what the curiosity, or like what your perspective is on centralization versus decentralization?
I don't know if I've got a perspective, but I am pro decentralization. I think centralization creates a control command network, and it leaves us very vulnerable to all sorts of bad outcomes. But I think when we decentralize, there's a lot more opportunity for free knowledge, free speech, free information, and community. Getting back to community, so the communities learn how to work together versus being told how to work together.
What are your thoughts on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think it's great. I'm not a huge Bitcoiner, but I think Bitcoin's great. But yeah, I don't really talk to the things that I don't have much experience of. I own Bitcoin, but yeah, I wouldn't talk to it in a way that I'm an expert by any stretch.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. Just because I think that it really brings a lot of these principles together that we're
It
fundamentally
does.
talking
It really
about.
does. Yeah.
And what I love about it is that really it's the community, and Saifedean from the Bitcoin Standard, he talks about how one community can disproportionately move the needle. And I'm really excited because Safe's coming on. But what I'd love to really emphasize is the importance of us as we can do it together. And these principles that guide us will be the ones that ultimately define us, so on and so forth, as we move forward. And what I love is hearing, this constant iteration in different nuances from different friends around the world, that we all have this same like depth of discovery within ourselves, and we want to come together. We want to do things that are the right way, right and wrong not being, but like necessarily
No, I get what you're
available.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So really, brother, I'd love to go into a little bit deeper in terms of uh, this energy that
Just before you hit off, buddy, I've got 2 minutes before I've got to leave the studio for my next
okay,
appointment. So whatever your last question is going to be, just make it a good one, buddy. This is your shot.
okay, brother. If you only have 2 minutes left to go, I guess the last question will be, if you had 3 days left to live, what would you do?
I'd spend it with my son.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Kerwin. Thank you for your time. What's the best way that anybody could connect with you if there's anything that they could do?
Mate, I'm on all the socials, so Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and kerwinrae.com. www. Fantastic, Eric. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, my friend.
Bless you, mate. All the best.
Likewise.
Cheers, mate.
Blessings.